Thank you, and we're back in open session now. I would like to ask Dr. Chernus if there was any report for closed session.
Nothing to report.
Thank you. Okay, we are now going to open our study session concerning the 2024-25 budget, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Hasty, and we're ready to go.
Sorry, who's this? Can you call me later? Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Good afternoon, Board, President Ms. Marcus and Superintendent Dr. Chernus. I want to start with introducing the team for the board study session. Today will be joining us is our Director of Fiscal, Marilu de Arcos, and of course, Mr. Karat, who is going to be joining us and talking about some of the different funding as well. Throughout the presentation, our Executive Director of Construction. Make sure. Okay, and I'm going to turn it over now to Marilu, who will then start talking about the budget and financial reporting cycle.
Good afternoon, everyone. You might be familiar with this budget financial reporting cycle, but I like to include it every time we're... Okay, thank you. Every time we go over our budget, just to understand where we're at in the fiscal year. We came to you in March with the second interim report for fiscal year 24-25. At this point, we have been working on our LCAP and budget prep for our next fiscal year. And you will be seeing that budget in June, where we will adopt the budget for fiscal year 25-26. In July, we begin to close the books for the current fiscal year of 24-25. And we just keep going around and around in a continuous cycle, updating future budgets and our current budgets at the same time.
Yeah, and feel free to jump in if you have any questions at any time. One thing I will say, each one of the steps that represent the circles here are governed by statute, and we have statutory reporting deadlines where we have to have the board approve. Ultimately, this is the board's, one of the most important powers you guys have is to approve the budget and the quarterly reports as necessary.
In this next slide, we want to go over what makes BHUSD a basic aid district. As you know, we have our LCFF funding formula, which most districts use to determine the funding that they will receive for each fiscal year. Our district is a community-funded district, meaning that our allocation of property taxes comes in higher than what our LCFF revenue would be, and that's what makes us a community-funded district.
Yeah, so, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the next slide goes over a little bit more between the differences between state aid district and property taxes. A state aid district is driven by ADA, and attendance really affects our revenue as a district. However, in a community funded, changes in ADA don't really affect our revenues because we are dependent on the property taxes. Increases in ADA result in lower per pupil revenues at our district, whereas increases in ADA would increase the revenue for other state aid districts.
And so you've seen this slide before in other presentations, but typically we only have the revenue and we show the last 6 years. I've truncated this slide to show the history of the last 4 years for property tax. You'll see, and I want to make sure it's clear that the 24-25 is still a projection as we end the year. We'll most likely end there. But the previous years, you'll see that top level where we started in 21-22 at 60 million. The next year we went to 65. The next year went to 68. And we're projected to be around 72. So what does that mean as a basic aid? Well, if we were to receive our regular funding as an ADA district, that funding essentially would equate to the lower tier you'll see there. And that's that 34 million. And then we go to 38 and 39. And then we're dropping a little bit down to 38. So when you hear about talks around COLA and how the impacts those have on districts as expenses go up, it is a real impact. But we are in a much different situation, being giving our revenues from property taxes. And you'll hear the term, well, how you might get the question, how deep are you in basic aid? So that's why I put that little, the table below there. You'll see we started off in 21-22 being about 73% into basic aid, meaning we're receiving that much more than the base funding of ADA. Whereas this year in 24-25, we're projected to be at 88% into basic aid. And so that's just, a number projected this year. So we are very healthy. There are some districts that may be on the edge there. They're just right above. And keep in mind, this isn't something voluntarily we do. It's a calculation that automatically puts us into basic aid.
Just a
Yes.
quick clarification. What you're saying that if we were an ADA district, our income would be $38,481, 38 million. That's what we would be getting as compared to what we are getting because we're basic aid.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted people to see that. Okay.
And if we had a sudden increase in enrollment, let's say, would that then trigger a change from?
Well, you look at that 88% and there's the gap, but
Yeah.
no. Well, go ahead.
Will not-
You'd need significant enrollment. You'd need twice as many.
In order
So
to trigger.
when I was the assistant soup in Dr. Hasey's position, we went into basic aid. And so we had revenues of, 45 million. And what happened to us is we fell into basic aid. The state cut
I see.
funding by 10%, and all of a sudden, what we were collecting in property taxes was more than the state was going to give us. So we fell into basic aid, which doesn't typically happen nowadays. But we are healthy into basic aid. We will never drop out of basic aid based on these projections. We will always be community funded.
And also, even though we will get more students, it's the same pool of money that's going to be divided for those numbers. So an increased enrollment does not change what that will be.
Correct. One nuance there, if you look at our total revenues, which we'll get to, we're at 100 million. So there is some money with, when we look at total combined, that's some excess that would be, but it's not as impactful. Make sure this isn't lagging. Okay. So general fund, I'm not going to read this slide word for word, but I want to make sure you understand. Unrestricted funds. So our general fund, which we mainly report out on, that is indicative of the true health of a district when we're talking about reserves and what's left over and expenditures, it's divided into two parts. And so you have your unrestricted side and your restricted side. Unrestricted side definitely need board approval. We have bidding thresholds, procurement, and all that. However, there is less, requirements with the statute. So, you're gonna have more flexibility, if you will. On the other side of that, when we talk about restricted dollars, we're definitely gonna have some statutes as to when, you're gonna receive that money. You have to follow certain rules that are usually dictated by state or federal law.
So examples of restricted funds would be funds we get from the lottery, funds that we get from the federal government, Title I funds, Title II, Title III, certain grants like our CTE grants, our after-school activities funding, which is called ELOP, our Prop 28 arts money. These are all restricted funds that must only be used for those things. When we talk about, if we can go back, when we talk about what percent is our reserves, we only want to focus on our unrestricted portion of Fund 1. So Fund 1 is our general fund. It's broken into restricted and unrestricted. The reserve percentage we want to focus on is our unrestricted resources. And you can see up there, that's obviously, as Dr. Hasty said, it's our revenues we get from taxes. It's also some of our donations. It's our JPA. These are all unrestricted monies.
And one big rule that is always hard to explain to everybody, restricted dollars cannot go negative, okay? So if they do, or we don't have money, say our expenses outpace our revenues on the restricted side, we will have to then pull from our unrestricted side to cover the difference. And that's just something, that's why I have these little notes in there. An example would be like special education. So we might get a dollar per child, but it costs $2. And that's the restricted side, but we have to pull an extra dollar from the unrestricted side to make that zero. So keep that in mind. Okay, so do you want to, I'll go over this one. So this is just, again, a breakdown, and I put some comments on here. You've seen some of these numbers before at second interim, but I wanted to get into more like the property tax revenue. And you see that local property tax, that's what makes up the majority of our revenues. And then we get into that, and I'm looking really at the comments section. You'll see there where state aid, Education Protection Act revenue, that's restricted revenue for instructional staff only. We have revenues such as for the CTE grants, those are all other state revenues you'll see. And then federal revenue, that's that IDA or the categoricals, you'll hear a term, or that federal dollars, the Title I, II, and III. And then, of course, our local revenue, which we get a significant portion of local revenue through the JPA. Total, when that's combined, this is unrestricted and restricted altogether, we're looking at $100 million at second interim of total revenue.
And the vast majority of that is unrestricted dollars, right? The only federal money we're getting, as you can see, 1.8 million, that's all going to be restricted money. The state money there, that 7 million, most of that I believe is restricted money. So the vast majority of our funding is going to be unrestricted.
We just need to total the local revenue with the property tax revenue, and that's basically what we have.
Yeah, that's a
in the
great way to look at it,
unrestricted.
yes.
Yep. Just clarifying.
Correct. And so this is more on the expense side, looking at total expenses. But again, what categories are we talking about? Obviously, everybody knows certificated salaries and classified salaries and benefits, which typically for your unrestricted, we're roughly around 84% of our total expenditures of unrestricted, or 84% of them are for salaries and benefits. So that is typically the majority of any district's budget.
So that's the top three you see there. We're spending 84% of our funds on the top three.
Then as we go down, you'll see the books and supplies. Those are, everything we need for, and that's not just books, it's also like maintenance supplies and things we buy with that. You see the services and other operating, for example, I put the NASTEC contract. We have SPED staffing contracts. We have legal costs would come out of that number. Capital outlay, and when we look at capital outlay, we're looking at anything that costs over that $5,000 mark. That's the difference between supplies and capital outlay. But if we're buying an HVAC system, we're doing some type of construction, and again, something that's going to last more than a year. And then, of course, the interfund transfers, we talk about that a few times because those are the dollars that we're transferring from our general one fund to the other areas.
And you'll see that when we talk about our other funds later, you'll see that we transfer money into them. But the total expenses right now of $108 million are pretty darn close to equal to our total revenues on the prior page.
Okay. So here's what we call the MYP multi-year projection. Looking at revenues as we go through, I don't want to go through all these, but really the Fund 17 is what we were talking about. That's, we're looking at 11.2, 11.1, and 11.3. That's that transfer out, Fund 17. We see our, above that, the general fund ending balance, 17.8 to 17.5 to going to 20. And then we're really looking at the reserves in its current state. Remember, these are all projections based on the numbers as of today, or actually second interim. So you see that was at 26. Current year, we're at 27.88, and then the out year is 30.34.
On this 27.88 for next year, that's without anything going forward as far as negotiations, and that's with before all of that.
Correct.
So I think that needs to be made clear that this is what's really what we're winding up with is 24, 25
Yes,
is right now at 26.87, and we're now looking at a projection of what it would be next year, but we have not It does not include any negotiations.
Correct. We're going to look at the other funds. You might have questions about this one? Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Stern.
So in the name of putting dollars towards some of the student programming, and we've identified, of course, educational excellence, what we care about. We want to work on some of the lacking test scores and achievement. So which funds here would be perhaps would lend themselves to some of the intervention dollars? So in other words, taking kids who are at the grade C or lower in elementary school, and we want to perhaps employ interventionists to identify them, to monitor them. I know from previous discussions that Title I, we have some of that funding, right? That would help with intervention.
Yes.
But what other buckets would lend themselves? I'm thinking specifically about like the 5th grade, 6th grade cohort where we start to see math, for example, maybe do a nosedive. And if you could just tell me a little bit about that.
So we'd look at our books and supplies account, where this year we spent 2.1 million. We would look at our other services account. So if you go to the next slide, the revenue side, we have,
This one's hard.
yeah. So we can use money out of a few different areas. The state revenue, we may have, some of this may be one-time money. Can you speak to potentially some one-time money there in
Yes,
the other state?
We have the Educator Effectiveness Grant that it's an ending fund balance, so we've had it, it's a one-time grant, and it's pretty much up until we spend it. So we've had a strategic plan of using those funds throughout multiple fiscal years. So as we receive certain funds from the state or federal, I think it's important for our leadership team to really plan accordingly with the board in terms of how we plan to use those funds. Kind of how they did with educator effectiveness. They had a plan and they spread those funds throughout multiple years. So identifying a source and being able to plan ahead for the needs that we want to address.
And each site has their own budget, so principals get a certain amount of money.
Yes.
Now, obviously, we don't want one school to feel like, hey, you know, they got extra money for that. But I think, and I implore my colleagues for us to think about some of the grades that really could use some of the support, whether, I'm sort of thinking 5th and 6th grade, but if we can look at that and then just sort of think about when we might apply some of these dollars for intervention, and which sites, you know, could benefit. And this would probably be less than $100,000. It would be, fairly inexpensive, but could go a long way, especially if, there is a rubric or there are deliverables, so to speak, or increments of how we can see what are the outcomes, per different parts of the year to see, okay, wow, it's working or it's not working. But I want to put that out there.
Can I say one thing in response to that? I totally agree, and I think that we have allocated a lot of dollars towards these extra endeavors to pull the kids where we would like them to be. Sometimes I get the feeling, or maybe it's because there's a lack of communication or a lack of reporting about it, that the students are not being met with the resources. And that's really unfortunate because we do have, for example, the tutoring that comes in a student's mother language. We do have 4 MFTs that we paid for this year to support our students and make sure that...
Well, I'm just talking academically.
No, I
MFTs
know.
aren't going to be doing
But there is
math work.
tutoring, like the
Yeah.
AIR tutoring and stuff like that. But then, so the question is, are those, what we have been doing, is that getting, are the
Translating
resources and the
into-
students being matched together, number one? And then number two, when we talk about the 55 cents on the dollar being spent on the classroom teacher, I would love to learn how that works hand in hand with what Dr. Stern is saying. Like, for example, we're going out and we're paying AIR tutors, but should we be paying our own teachers as tutors, and would that go toward the 55 cents on the dollar equation? That's something that I would be interested in learning about as well. But I agree with you, Dr. Stern. It's like, what else can we do? And to the extent that the board is agreeing to do it, is the district ensuring that those resources are being matched with the students that need them? You know, do
Yeah.
all the teachers know that these resources are available? Or is it just site administration? You know,
Yeah.
it's hard to ask a principal to make sure that every student is getting everything they need because they have 500-600 students.
Yeah.
You know, should we be educating the teachers more so that they can get the support from these outside opportunities?
That,
Go ahead.
We'll incorporate this into our LCAP and in a year presentation to talk about this as a priority for the board.
Yes, and I just want to make one clarification. So there are tutors, a lot of schools in LA, whatever, have tutors. They have sort of on-demand type of help, and I believe sort of air tutors like that. But if you have an interventionist teacher, which is a specific part-time, there's like hours per week, and you know, when our schools are hopefully having the data chats about how kids are doing in math, and you know, they are communicating, so they have a roster of which kids are really needing that. And then if it goes under the purview of one identified intervention teacher, it really does have different types of results than just these great resources that I agree, it's possible that they're not being tapped into as much. But I just want to clarify that an interventionist teacher can often be someone who is looking, you know, away from all the looking at a sort of a macro view of the data that is coming forth from the classroom teachers, and can really pull together some really nice results.
Yeah. And so then maybe to your point, we should be using the dollars towards interventionists more than
Yes.
outside, so it would be more effective, based on what you're telling me.
Yes, and there's a number of ways to do that, but it's definitely something that I think would be helpful, and to identify some of the kids that might need that help. And again, based on talking to, you know, some of the personnel here, it seems to me that some of the late elementary school grades would really benefit, particularly. Okay, thank you.
As I recall, we did add, for this year, we added the therapists to each of the schools, you recall, we had.
Right, but as I was saying, that type of support is great, but I'm talking strictly some of the academic support. I don't mean right now, for once, I'm not talking about happiness, I'm talking about some of the skill sets, mastery, giving mock.
We converted each other.
Yeah, we did a conversion here. So what I'm talking about strictly is support in terms of academic weakness, going along with our guideposts, which is that we want to succeed in academics and to really make some of our, you know, relatively small amount of money to reinforce some of the academic skills and deficits. That's all. I just want to
I'm
put
just
that up.
saying that we do have, you know.
Yeah, we do, we certainly do, yeah.
And I would like to ask a question about the beginning, the first interim report and the second interim report. I noticed that there was an increase of almost $750,000 against the general fund. Do we know?
Are we talking about the total unrestricted fund balance, ending fund balance?
Well, the general fund at the first interim, and I know we did get a letter from the county about that there was a almost $750,000, we spent more from the general fund than in the second interim report than we had for the first. Do we?
Yeah, I want to say that, I believe that was part of our, it could have been our deferred maintenance. Would it be the move here, the 750? Are you talking about one of these numbers here?
I'm talking about the
They're
total
just-
general fund review at the very bottom.
So,
That second interim report shows a 753,000.
this one right here?
I'm on slide 9.
Okay.
I believe it was due to the Golden State Pathways grants that we incorporated at second interim. It's a new grant from the state to support CTE programs, and that was sort of the amount of the revenue we're receiving, and we incorporated that at second interim.
Okay.
So what you see is the increase is on that all other state revenue box, going from 6.14 to 7 million. And that was a grant that we got.
Yeah, but the property tax revenue, by the way, did drop during that period, too.
Yeah. Yes, it did. It did drop a little bit. Remember, though, at first interim report, it actually went up almost $1 million from budget adoption, so which was a good thing. But yeah, so you're talking. Just to be clear, you're talking about the revenues, the increase in revenues from 18 to 17.9 on local revenues in total was, or I'm sorry, for total fund balance was because of the CTE grants, yes.
So regarding CTE grants, did you have more, Mrs.
No,
Marcus?
that's it, I've
Regarding CTE grants, my understanding was, and it looks like it's confirmed by this presentation, that CTE grants are used exclusively for CTE.
Correct,
They were on the restricted
Correct.
side of the aisle.
yes,
And so, in other words, CTE grants cannot be used for non-CTE programs or teachers.
correct.
Okay.
So, and for us, just last year, and I'm throwing numbers and she'll correct me if I'm wrong, but 23, 24, we received 300,000 in CTE grants. And we had a 2-to-1 match requirement. That's what makes it restricted. So yeah, there's requirements, but we actually spent, I want to say we went 600, or the total was for the year was 900,000. So instead of doing a 2-to-1 match, we were way over the required match. But again, that was all spent on CTE teachers and their salaries and benefits and
Okay.
other things.
So I'm just going to repeat because I want to make
Yes.
sure we're 100% on the same page.
Correct.
I
In this-
agree.
In this school year, Beverly Hills Unified School District received approximately and only $300,000.
That was last year.
That was
This
last,
year,
yeah, okay.
this year.
So
we
we'll
were-
talk about
yeah.
last year, that's
Yeah.
okay. Last year, BHUSD received approximately $300,000 in CTE grants.
Yes.
No more. And then the district matched it by adding 600,000, so the total was 900,000 going towards CTE, staff, programming, et cetera.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, can you, go ahead, please.
Sorry, because that's the requirement, right, the 2-to-1?
Yeah.
So 300,000 is the allocation we received, 600,000 is the match that we are required to match.
more than that.
However, our expenses were about 1.2 million, meaning that we contributed an additional about 300,000 to the required match of 600,000.
And that goes back to my note, we can't be zero on these restricted
Mm-hmm.
dollars, so we had to pull from our own general fund to cover the difference.
Yeah.
And even this year, we got less of an allocation at the beginning of the year, but our plan is to keep these, CT programs going strong, and we contribute for our general fund to do so.
Okay, Mr. Arcos, do you have an estimate for this current school year about that
Yes, so
CTE amount?
our allocation is actually less this year. We have about 150,000.
That means we received
We received
approximately?
approximately 150,000, and we have to match it with 300,000. So we do have less CTE funds this year. We are projecting a contribution at this point of about 800,000.
Okay,
Be pulled
Oh,
from
wow.
the general fund.
Yes,
so we're making up the full difference. Okay,
yes.
do you know why in this school year the grants have divided by about half? If I'm understanding you correctly, last year we got approximately 300K in CTE grants. This year we received 150K. That's not our doing.
Right.
Why did that happen?
So every year, we have Cindy Dubin, who does a great job at completing all the applications for these grants. And so she'll submit, and depending on the approval, those are the allocations that we receive. So every year, she continues to go out there and applies for different portions of the grants. She'll present our plans and why we would need these funds to run our programs, and depending on the committee that selects us, that's the allocation that we are awarded.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful to know. Thank you.
Yeah, just referring to an email I got from Dustin Seaman, I guess this has been a month or so ago. But yeah, again, just staying on the CTE topic, it's very kind of confusing to me here. I don't know if you've seen this before.
Oh, yeah, the chart.
Yeah, the chart. Like when it talks about like the GSPP hospitality grant of 458,000 over a 5-year period, is that like 50,000 a year for 5 years, or is that 458,000 every year for 5 years, or what does that mean?
It's a total amount of 458,000 that we have
Okay.
to split up, or we have about 5 years to spend it. And so it's up to our district to decide what the plan is of implementing.
Because I'm just trying to figure out to add up the $150,000 that you had just mentioned,
Oh, that's separate from this.
separate from this.
Yes,
So
from the
what
Golden
exactly-
State Pathway.
Oh,
So
you're just talking about the Golden State pathway.
The grant you're referring to is the Golden State Pathway, but the discussion about the 150,000, that's the CTEIG program.
So how much grant money are we getting in total coming into the CTE
In
program?
total. Give me a second and I'll pull that up.
Yeah, we'll have to add that up.
So you're trying to find out, does it all come in this year? Will it be
Well,
replenished next year?
I think just the conclusion of this conversation is the general public would say, oh, there's only $150,000 of money that's coming in for CTE,
In grants?
in grants.
Yeah. Well, we need to be clear, there's multiple grants, that's what.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
that's what I'm asking, is the all-in. So
Yeah,
my
it.
understanding.
The all-in number
Yeah.
is not $150,000.
No.
So I'll just tell you one thing. I am interpreting it as, let's say we get a $500,000 grant, and we're determining that we're gonna split it up over the course of 5 years, so $100K a year. That piece I can live with, that we don't wanna spend it all in one day. But my takeaway from our conversation 2 minutes ago was that last year, depending on how we're slicing the cake, we got $300K in CTE grants. This year, depending on how we're determining to use them, which is consistent with past years, we got $150K.
Yeah, that was for the CTEIG grant that funds, certain programs. So they're specific to certain programs.
What does IG stand for?
Do you know the acronym? I would have to look it up.
Sorry, don't know the acronym,
That's
but I
okay.
do have the allocations for each of the grants that make up CTE.
Okay,
Okay, so the GSPP hospitality grant that we were awarded was $458,000. We have 5 years to spend those funds. The GSPP healthcare MSA grant, we have $250,000 and 5 years to spend those funds.
Sorry to interrupt you,
Yes.
but does that mean that they've already cut that check and it's sitting with us? Or we can tap into that at any time?
That's the interesting part about the fiscal accounting. Some programs, you receive the funds after the fact, and so we would book that in our books as a
So you're
receivable.
sending the receipt in
pending.
and they're paying you
Right,
back?
and then other grants, they'll send you the funds first. So
Which one is which?
it depends by the resource, but I think these we've already received, so they're sitting in our ending fund balance.
Understood.
okay.
Yeah, and IG stands for incentive grant.
Got you, thank you. So hospitality, MSA,
Was 250,000
Yeah.
5
and ro-
years.
in 5 years?
Robotics is 250,000.
Yes, robotics,
Where
250,000.
are we in terms of those? Where are we in terms of the 5 years now? Is that, are we in the middle of it, or?
No,
Have we spent some of it?
We have not spent those funds because I think there's a larger plan that has to do with the culinary program and other items that haven't been organized and planned, but we're on year 1, so we have, after this fiscal year, we'll have 4 more years to implement.
So of the first three that you just mentioned, the hospitality, the healthcare, MSA, and the robotics, we've already received those funds and they're sitting,
Right,
waiting to be allocated for whatever we've chosen.
yes.
Yeah.
For the 5, and it was
That is
robotic?
not really described here, that this is a budget of some sort, which doesn't really tell us anything, so.
The
So-
longevity of it.
So we'll definitely bring this to the board as far as our CTE specific funding and our plan for how we're going to spend it.
Great. Okay.
But we are required to spend it on CTE, and they can't
Correct.
be allocated.
Specifically for where we got the grant. So medical science grant has to go to medical science, et cetera.
Well, I mean, I just want to get this on the record that obviously there's been accusations said publicly that CTE funds have been taken and misappropriated. I'm not conferring those things, but in the end, we have been asking CTE questions ever since I've been on the board for 5 months. I've not gotten one straight answer yet, ever. Even seeing this chart doesn't really make a lot of sense. You need to ask 30 well-versed, thoughtful, ideas here to even understand what this means. I personally would like to see a full breakdown of the money, of what do we have, what have we already spent, what is allocated to each thing, so we can put these rumors to bed, and the loudest voices who are saying that because of, you know, state law changes and BHEA and who's under what purview now, that this whole thing is a plot to take money from these funds and move them into other things. And if that's not the case, then I would love to have it here in front of me and to let the entire public know. But as of right now, I'm going down through these things. Which one of these things on this list, because I think we have the same one that you have, I mean, you know, it says hospitality, healthcare, and robotics, and then there's the Medical Services Academy, K-12 SWP, round 5, theater tech, BHES Career Academy, which I believe is the hotel program. Is that what that's basically is?
Yep.
Yes.
So, you know, just for the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room, which funds are to KBEV?
Okay, so I just requested, Chrissy's gonna print out, I think you don't have access to this other form that I have, which breaks down.
We don't have access to much.
So I want to share that with you. It's the different grants that we've received for the entire CTE program. And I have when we received the award, how long we have to spend it, how much did we spend last year, how much did we contribute. It's a whole breakdown of all that information, which I feel is tremendous.
You're the gatekeeper of all the cool stuff.
Well, let me explain. I mean, for the purposes of this presentation, and really it's that one line, all other state revenues. And some of that's, most of it's restricted, or, you know, some of it's unrestricted. And I know we're diving deeper into this one row, but we can definitely, this is something we would love to spend time and talk to you about the nuances of that dollar. But that dollar amount is that 7 million. How much is in KBEV? I know CTEIG incentive grant, there's a portion of that that definitely is the main funding source of KBEV, but we are also contributing some. We can bring that to you, though.
But we can say on the record, though, that no funds that are dictated for CTE are being misappropriated or taken out of anything
Absolutely,
into anything else.
absolutely not.
If
There's-
anything,
yeah.
it's the opposite, which is that the funds are reducing and the district is supplementing,
Correct.
demonstrating our commitment and our prioritization of our CTE programming.
Yes.
I would like to recommend that maybe we have a study session just on that CTE situation.
Yeah, we've had a request, right, about
Yeah,
CTE in
and
general.
I've heard the same complaint from, that Mr. Stewart has heard about the allocation of funds and whether they get there or they don't get there or how they're being used. So I think it might behoove us to have some sort of a thing in advance so that we understand and we can, you know, address the public about their concerns. And I know that there are concerns
Yeah.
about that. So it might be something that we want to look at as we go forward for the budget for next
Yeah.
year. And I think we would agree with that, right?
Absolutely, thank you.
Can I say something?
Yes, Mrs. Sabag?
So I think the point of allocation, where the funds are allocated, is really important. So when we see it being budgeted and we see the amount that we're receiving in one big bulk, it's hard for us to understand exactly where it's going. That way we can have the classes, so we know exactly where everything's going. So for instance, like we did with the theater, we can take out the grant from the arts program and we can put it into the theater, but we need to also see it. So how much did we take out? How much is from the general funds? How much is from the grant? So as soon as we see everything budgeted in a certain way, then we know how we can spend, you know,
Yeah.
how we can allocate the funds elsewhere.
What I think would be good, I mean, for a study session, and this is just, for the purpose of this, is to start these discussions, and then we can really get into more, we'll bring the budget, and then it gets more into programmatic pieces and process. Because I think that's part of it too. If you're not clear on the process on how dollars are moving, we could talk about that. But yes, we can definitely do that. Now, for the purposes, I will defend the process for interim reporting. When we bring interim reports, this is, you know, we're going to bring the bigger numbers as usual for the budget in general. But yeah, if we get into more study session areas that are focused on certain programs and budgets, yeah, we can definitely do that.
I think the most important thing is that there shouldn't be any questions asked. Everything should be really transparent and really clear for everybody to see. And once that's settled and we have it all
I think what you're asking for is a breakdown
Yes.
within each one. and
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't even need a study session, I just need the breakdown.
Okay.
I feel like when I have the study session, when I have the breakdown, and based on the information you're making available to me now, it's gonna be easy for us to figure out. So I don't wanna ask you guys to put together a study session. Maybe we'll go back, we'll look at the document, and then if we need one, we'll ask for it.
Well, I'm just in case.
We're gonna, yeah, we have the other funds, and we want to get into that because what we've been talking up to this point is what we call O1 or General Fund O1, which now we're going to get into our different funds outside of the general fund. And this is just a simple breakdown. What you're seeing here is a estimated, it's all projections, a second interim. And we talk about, when we hear about Fund 13, child nutrition, and again, I can also talk about CEA. So cost of current education, that 55%, when things are expended in these areas, it would not impact that. Remember, 55% is only that general fund 01. This is not general fund, these areas. So the areas, as you'll see, we have the child nutrition, and that is governed by statute as a restricted fund in general. Like, it's just Fund 13 is restricted. So we have to do certain things. We have audits, and I will talk more about that later. Deferred maintenance, Fund 14, we'll get into that. Statute change in about 2013 on that, where we used to have to, by law, put 0.5 of our general fund expenditures. We had to restrict some of that into that Fund 14. We don't do that anymore. However, we do use this for obvious reasons. Special Reserve Fund 17, that's the one we talked about. That was part of our reserve. You see that 15.4 million. And then, of course, the GO bond, and then we have developer fees. And I won't go through all these because we're going to break them down some more as we go forward. Starting with Fund 13, again, restricted. It is, you'll hear about that KIP funding that we talked about at our last board meeting, but that was a grant fund. That wasn't actually in this fund, but it was a restricted grant fund we were using. But this fund is going to pay for all obviously our food that we actually buy, the commodities, the salaries, the kitchen operations, if we have to buy any equipment. We also have some of that grant money and that KIP funding also we can use for those purposes. But you'll see here, and I want to make sure you understand this chart. So where we began at the beginning of the year with our beginning balance for 24-25, you see 1.381 million. And then you see the green bar, which is the next one over, and that's our revenues for 24-25. And again, these are the projected revenues. So we're going to bring in 2.5 million. Now, our projected expenditures, and when we say that, we're projecting up to June 30th, we're going to be spending 2.6. That's why it's in the parentheses representing a negative number. The good news about this fund, we don't have to contribute. Now, some nutrition programs, you would see a contribution there because people don't always run them the right way. And I believe before, at one point, we had to contribute some dollars from another fund to make this zero. But we don't have a contribution, which is good, and we are projecting at the end of this year, the ending fund balance, EFB 24-25, will be at 1.3 million.
Okay, so let me elaborate here. So this is restricted dollars we get typically from the state or the feds. With respect to food service, it's mostly coming from.
Yeah,
From
we
the state.
get, go ahead.
Mostly from the state.
So
and
the
a
state of
portion from
California,
federal.
portion from the federal.
Yes.
Okay, restricted money. We're looking at basically a break even this year, give or take, right? Spending 2.575, estimating spending 2.6 million. So we have a balance in this account. The balance is 1.3 million, 1.347 million. That money cannot leave this account. It can't go to the general fund and be used for unrestricted. It can't be used in the building fund. It can't be used in deferred maintenance. It must stay here, even if there's a balance. You could spend it on employees, spend it on staffing, you spend it on our food service workers. All that can come out of this fund. Professional development, everything, food, obviously, everything can come out of this fund is what you spend it on.
Okay, now we get into Fund 14, deferred maintenance. So right here, I already said before 2013, we would have had to contribute, but the statute changed, and so we do have some more flexibility with this. But here again, a breakdown. What we're looking at is beginning fund balance of 264,000. Based on interest, that's that revenue you see for 13, and then we spent about 1.7, and then of course the contribution. Now we are contributing to this because that's what we budget. We budget a contribution based on what we spend on deferred maintenance projects. One of the examples for 24-25, we did a district office move. I said we were going to transfer out about $1 million for the district office move. We're roughly around 600,000 around there. But anyway, so that's some of that stuff. But that really, we do that towards the end. We're going to project a contribution. We're going to take from our general fund, unrestricted, and contribute into this fund for deferred maintenance projects going forward into 25-26. But again, this is what we had to do for this year, 1.8. We're going to need to contribute for this year. And then we'll end right around 351,000 after that.
But we make a contribution every year, as I recall.
Yes, we do.
Of $500,000, is it 500,000?
This one's more, $852,000
Correct.
every year.
So,
How much did you say?
852,000?
Oh, it's 852, I thought it was 500.
so it's also important to know that historically, the reason why this is its own fund is because the state used to match your contribution. And so you put in $1 million, the state will put in $1 million. They stopped doing that about 20 years ago. And because of that, we still hold these funds. This is basically a general fund unrestricted expense. We're not getting money for deferred maintenance from anywhere else. So if the roofs need repairs, if pipes break, we need to spend our money on it. And so the contribution, you said 850,000, I would say keep that at a minimum.
No, I'm not, I agree with that.
Just a
but
way to organize.
I'm trying to
correct.
make sure that this is a restricted fund also then, because even though we're supplying the money for it.
We locally restricted ourselves, but
We
it's,
just put it aside.
Yeah, I know, but we
It
know
is.
it's,
We're designating it.
It's designated, but it actually, by law, it's not restricted.
that's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, if we wanted to take all this money and put it in the general fund, you
This-
could,
By law, we can do that.
because it's
Well,
coming
obviously,
from
we're
the
not
general
going to.
fund.
Okay,
Right.
But
I wanted people to understand that.
does this mean that the move from the old district office to Hawthorne cost this district $800,000?
no.
600, I heard.
We typically budget, and when we look at a multi-year projection, we budget 852,000. It was a number that came from before. Some districts will do 1%, depending on what the board or the district wants to do. But we've always put 852. This year, at first interim, we made an adjustment to transfer $1 million out because we weren't sure how much this move was totally gonna cost. We were looking about $1 million. We've landed around 600,000 for the year, but just in case, so we do have a buffer of about 400.
I just will let you know that this board did not approve that, and the numbers that were previously provided to us were
350.
350, 250, something like that. So can you just give us an update on where those dollars went, please?
Correct?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, I can.
It was 350, I believe.
Because we did it all in-house.
Yes, so we did the majority of everything in-house for that move, and with everything all in, overtime and all it costs is around 600,000.
Okay, I would be interested to have some more details on that, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Special Reserve Fund 17. And again, we have flexibility. What we have done, we have a 17.2 and 17.1. We call those sub-funds, just to let you know, we break it up. But at 17.1 is that, per the board's direction, we created that sub-fund for tech refresh. And so we automatically every year now put 500,000, transfer out from our unrestricted general fund into the 17.1 fund for a tech refresh. And this is also getting us ahead of per our previous discussions around the bond costs for getting new laptops and devices for students. The 17.2, we're also putting money away for liabilities and potential litigation down the line, and that's really important. But getting into this, we'll look at the total, fund total, with everything included. We're roughly, right now, we're at about 14.4, a beginning balance. We're gonna have some interest on that throughout the year, projected at 214. Obviously, there's we have no expenses right now. We will have some expenses based on the last board approval when we purchased those $470,000 worth of laptops we talked about last board meeting. So that would come out of here. But then you see that contribution. We are automatically contributing $750,000 projected to into this fund as well. And so 250 of that will go to litigation, liabilities down the line, not actual litigation, but liabilities thereof. And then, of course, another 500 will go for that tech refresh. But at the end of this year, we're projected to be roughly around 15.4. Okay. And I'm gonna let Will jump in because he really wanted to talk about Fund 21.
Good evening, hello. Well, I didn't really want to talk about this, but I'd love to, because we presented most of this information on Tuesday, last Tuesday. But yeah, our building, Fund 21 is the bond, basically. We use that for our capital projects, construction projects, and and that's related to new construction, modernizations, and any costs related to that, like soft costs. So here you can see what our starting balance was, 156 million. About 3 million of that we were able to capture in interest. And then this year we are anticipated on spending 61 million out of that fund, and that's mostly from our major projects like the new Conheim, B3, B4 wrapping up, and also the upper athletic field. That's the main chunk of that 61 million. And then at the end of this year, we're expecting to have about 97 million in our ending fund balance, which we'll be spending on those projects and then planning for the future project of the South Side Athletic Field. One other note we have on here is just that we have, supervision and monitoring by me, the Founder Solari team. We have a Citizens Bond Oversight Committee that also monitors our expenses. And I think that's it for Fund 21.
Okay. Do you want to talk about developer fees?
Sorry.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just wanted, I keep bringing up the anticipated shortfall in a couple of years because I don't want us to be in a position where we're suddenly having to let go of programs and people. And so that's why I keep trying to raise the flag on that today, because if we can be strategic and plan today, then we have stability going forward. I'm very grateful to you and the Founder Solari Bond Management Team for reducing the deficit from 14 to 6, and Dr. Chernus and Dr. Hasty for moving the technology portion of the bond dollars back into the general fund of the bond dollars for construction. Do we want to start funneling in developer fee dollars toward the bond? Because if I'm understanding correctly, in a couple years now, we'll only have approximately $6 million shortfall. And so I'm just asking the question.
I can answer that.
And are we allowed to spend I think we are.
Yes, so we actually are planning on that. That's part of our budget. We anticipated conservatively approximately how much we would take from the developer fees. It was a very conservative number, which was reflected in our deficit. So on the next slide, actually, you'll see our developer fees, and we haven't spent much out of developer fees outside of work we did at Horace Mann, but we are anticipating using the developer fees, or a good chunk of it, for our construction projects, and that was included in that budget report we presented last week.
I was under the impression that developer fees could only be actually used to show because of what enrollment and so on. And I'm not sure, as I understood from the very beginning, that we could actually use developer fees for construction, just general construction. So unless you can point to the fact that, yeah, this was needed because there was in number of, it was like something happened and we need to increase something, I don't know that we can use those funds. That's the way I understood it.
Well, that is, I guess, the strict definition of the developer fees, but we've been able to show that we can use it for, as long as we're modernizing or adding square footage to our campus.
That's it.
What
It
we're
has to be
doing-
used
yeah.
specifically to show an increase of something in
Yes.
terms of population and so on.
And need for programs.
Capacity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also safety, you can use it for safety as
safety.
well.
But we have to be very careful because I don't want anybody to come back at us and say that we've done something that we
Yeah,
shouldn't be
before,
doing.
that's why we haven't transferred any money specifically yet. It's still in the developer fee fund. When it comes time for us to make that transfer, we're going to make sure we allocate it to the right project.
I know we used a lot of them when we reconfigured Beverly Vista.
Yes.
Because that was a chance of student population and
Yep.
so on.
Exactly.
So going back to developer fees, our projected revenues each year average about how much?
Yeah, right now around 500,000, and, well, the other thing, we just brought that developer fee study in the resolution at our last board meeting.
Yeah.
So we're gonna increase the cost per square foot, which should increase revenues.
The percentage is gonna
We
increase
have
and
that,
also,
did that get approved yet?
Yeah, it
Yes.
was approved.
Okay.
so that'll take effect 60 days from our last meeting, but also we anticipate more construction happening in this community, so we'll be receiving more money over the next few years.
Thank you. Okay.
Also, some of our upcoming projects and current projects have classrooms in them too, like the new Conheim will have classrooms. B3 and B4 does have instructional spaces.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna go on to Fund 35.
All right.
Can I ask in regards to the developer fees, can we use that for security in the high school?
Yeah, I mean, yes, my understanding to a degree depends on if it's new, but go ahead.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely not on people. Is it-
No. We have, it's too open, yeah, the surrounding
Yeah,
barriers.
so I'll give you an example. So we are in process of fixing the gap in the gate at the high school. And so we will use developer fees for
Also, the
that.
front, not specifically that front, but where the science building is,
Okay.
where the cars go in and out. We took pictures actually in Washington. Colby took some pictures,
Okay.
which was an amazing, it would match the high school. So my question is, how much do we have? So we have 2 million that we're not using right now, that we could use, and it could go up, right, next year?
Yes,
Okay, so we could considerably use that for the high school?
correct.
Okay,
Yes.
great, thanks.
I can briefly talk about this. This is the reimbursement that I spoke about at the last meeting, the funds and the modernization funds from the state that we expect to get, and that's where this Fund 35 comes. We get reimbursed for projects that we've already completed that are related to seismic retrofit projects, which is the majority of the funding that we receive. This balance here, we are also already accounting into our budget, so we just haven't made the transfer yet. Because we don't really have a need to make the transfer yet, so we're still showing in our Fund 35. I don't know if you're about to say something, it looked like you were.
Just for accounting purposes, we would have to spend it out of Fund 35, but they're basically bond dollars that we have for WELS projects.
Do we anticipate anything coming in the future for facilities fund?
Yes, so right now we're qualified for about 4.5 million, roughly, and that is at the state right now, and we're just waiting for the process to be completed, and we're expecting around 27 or 28, 2027 or 2028.
So
We
all the state money we get back goes into Fund 35.
Right.
And so we could get, a lot more than that, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully, like I said, we've heard through our consultant,
But
HPD,
it can
that
be used toward construction. I mean, that's.
it's directly to reimburse projects we've already completed,
Is that restricted then to
to bond projects.
the bond
It
project?
goes back
Yes.
into the
But-
bond. So
but-
basically, we're getting the funds back because we used the bonds
Yes.
in order to do the California State seismic.
Yeah.
We've done what they've
Correct.
required, so
But
they're
you-
giving us money back. They're rewarding us.
But the calculation that we most recently received includes the 4.5 million. So it's not gonna be like, oh, we're gonna get a bonus. The way we as a board are looking to the future is that we are assuming we're gonna get those dollars, and incorporating that gift back from the state, we still will be short between 6 to 7 million.
Was that calculated?
Well, we
think so.
we didn't calculate it totally because we still don't know, so we're trying to be conservative in
Okay.
our estimates.
So how much are promised?
Well, the -8 million is what we saw, remember the dollar amount. So that was inclusive of this. Now, we're
Yes.
looking at potentially, nothing realized yet, 3 to 4, but we're not there yet. Yeah,
Okay.
and we don't put anything in the numbers or in the reports until we realize.
Yeah,
And-
and then another chunk might not come until 2030. And so even if
Correct.
we get it, we still will have to make up the difference
Into paper.
in the meantime. So we have to act like we don't have those dollars, because 2030 is 5 years from now.
How long does it take them to process the paperwork in order to receive the reimbursement of funds?
It takes quite a while, like 4 to 5 years, but with Prop
Wow,
2, that
okay.
actually delayed that applications that we have already submitted.
So we have
So-
to push it,
Yeah, so.
otherwise they can forget it.
I don't think
They-
we'll
they won't
forget it. There's a
forget.
good chance we're going to get it, but it's not promised to us and it's not guaranteed yet.
Is there metrics of awarding the applications based on the
Yes.
socioeconomic status?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is there a way to get that? What are we doing? I guess this is a question for Dr. Hasty, since I'm just walking into
Sorry.
it. Have we done anything to lobby, has Basic Aid Districts, has anything to try to lobby to change that? Because it's totally unfair to fund, facilities should be funded based on the condition of the facilities, not on the demographics of the community. And so what I'm hearing is we are last in line based on our demographics, even if we have buildings that were in dire need of repair. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I'm not sure if we haven't done any direct lobbying on behalf of the school district, but our consultants always are lobbying for eliminating that,
So equity funding got turned into facility funding, got inserted into facility funding. And when was that?
I couldn't tell you.
I don't know.
Sorry.
Dr. Chernus, based on the conversation we had with Dr. Seaman in the last board meeting, we do have a significant Title I headcount that we maybe didn't have when you
It's going up.
and Raphael submitted the paperwork a couple years ago. You guys submitted that paperwork when I first came on, and Dr. Seaman shared that the numbers in the last 2 years have increased dramatically. And so I just would ask if you could look back into that to double check if our application should be amended in that case.
I would say we could look, but if we do amend it, it might put us back at the bottom
Sure.
of the list.
Okay, it still would be good to know. Thank
No,
Well-
we have two other applications we have preparing to submit in July of this year. And,
Yeah, so
it's
maybe,
for quite a substantial amount more, and we're just hoping that it gets approved.
okay, so maybe it would be very important to know what are our demographics in anticipation of submitting those.
Do they have like an online source where you look at and you see what they're working on, who they're working on?
Yeah,
what district?
OPSC is, they have a monthly meeting where they provide an update on which ones they're working on. I don't know if they specifically say by school district, but, yeah, if you go to OPSC, they provide updates after their weekly, or
If you
monthly
keep-
meetings.
Usually in these circumstances, if you keep pushing and they know that you're on top of it, you'll get the refund faster. Because either way, they have to give the refund, because that was part of their whole deal
Yeah,
of,
that's why we're
right?
saying we're expecting to get the 4.7 million, but it's not guaranteed yet, but we're expecting it.
Why would it not be guaranteed?
'Cause
Not
you never
guaranteed
know, I
when you'll
guess.
get it, but we'll get it anyways.
Or
Yeah,
how much?
yeah, I mean, I guess in the public school construction world, we never guarantee until we see it.
Yeah, you just apply and then
Yeah.
whatever happens, happens. But I think we should be on top
Well,
of it.
you don't get it if they run out of money,
That's exactly
That's,
it.
right?
yeah.
So can we see where we are in
That's why we have to
line? Are
push
you
it.
able to access that?
Yep.
And again, the equity discussion, one thing we're still lobbying for example, basic aid districts do not get the TK add-on, which is about $3,000 per student. So we're actively lobbying that one as well to get that add-on, and it actually made it out of committee about last week. So there's a number
Bless
of
you.
these out there that we're fighting all the time for community-funded districts.
Thank you, because the universal TK year is expanding, which means that even more students will be eligible starting this fall. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah,
God bless you.
So Fund 71, OPEB, that's our post-employment benefits. So when people retire, we have agreed to pay a portion of their benefits for health and welfare. So what we call that is an unfunded liability. I will say this again and again, Beverly Hills Unified School District is way in front of most other districts, and I learned a lot about this moving forward. So we do a contribution every year. I want to say it's roughly $700,000-800,000 that would be to this benefit. Right now, we started, you see that beginning balance in this fund, which is Fund 71. Again, a restricted. This goes into an irrevocable trust. So once it goes in, we can't just pull it out. We can't do anything with this. However, we're getting to the point where we'll have a fully funded liability, which would be more dollars that would fall into our general fund eventually. And so right there, you see we're starting at 7.7. We're going to end right around 9.1. I want to say our fully funded is going to be around 15, 16 million. So we have about 5 or 6 years, and we can adjust how much we want to transfer out. This has been, the dollars we do transfer out is through guidance from the Finance Committee. And, you know, so I think this is a really good fiscal position for a district, for any district, for where we're at.
Finance committee.
Yeah, I
Yes.
agree with you, Mrs. Marcus. We worked really hard with our finance committee on this one in the last couple years, and I think we borrow against this amount. And so we landed on these figures because we ended up getting really good rates
Yep.
based on where we landed. So it worked for us, and we felt like it was communicating to our staff that we value them and we value their future, and we want them to know we're stable.
Yep. And I get a report every quarter on the performance of this trust. So we're not only contributing, but it's also making interest. So just a real quick snapshot just for contextual understanding. Based on the second interim, if we're looking at a total all-in unrestricted and restricted together for the general fund, what would it cost for a 1% increase? And when we do increases for a bargaining group, we're looking at all bargaining groups. So bottom line, it would cost about $7,000 or $6,000 for 1%. That's based on the second interim numbers. And of course, if you're looking at, if we were to raise, when we talk about caps, right now our cap, if you will, what we will pay is up to $13,250. Again, I'll say it so everybody understands, $13,250 is the benefit cap that the district will cover an employee who works for us up to that amount. If we were to increase that cap by $1,000, it would cost us about $439,000. Keep in mind, we roughly have about 292 people that are actually taking the benefits right now. And you know, if it were to go up, we have to remember that, well, maybe, hey, I was paying a lot out of pocket, or I didn't want to pay a lot out of pocket, but now that you raise this cap, I might join into this program. Yes. Yes, or I
Another
might.
member of the family was paying for it or something, and when they weren't using it, now if it goes up, they may decide to use it, and it thus becomes more than 292 people.
Exactly. So when we do the numbers based on who is actually taking the benefits at this point. But again, if we were to increase that cap, it could make those benefits more enticing for more people to take, increasing the cost to the district. But I just want to put that out there, and I always put the note. You'll see a lot of little notes on here in fine print that budgets are always projections, and so are these numbers. Dr. Chernis?
Just a quick question. If you can't answer it, we'll provide to the board later. But you mentioned 292 eligible employees take the benefits. Do we have a rough number of the number of eligible employees that could take the benefits?
I want to say
Total?
we're roughly around 500. I don't have the total number off the top of my head, but I want to say it's right
Okay.
around 500.
So about 60% of our employees eligible take the benefits.
Correct.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? This is more related to the medical insurance for all, not just for OPEB. So I don't know if you're getting to that, but
No, this is
Okay,
one of the
this
last
would be-
slides.
okay.
Yes.
when will we see the next like recalculation and formula for like the benefits that are offered based on our demographics? Because I know that we use, what is the broker we use again?
Burnham.
Burnham, okay. So when does Burnham do our analysis and perhaps so we can look at?
Yeah, we'll reach out to them. It's usually annually. I know I've worked with them in the fall because new rates and benefits all start on a regular a corporate fiscal year, January 1. So I'm assuming we're going to meet with Burnham in August. That's been my past experience. And what they do there is they present to us all the employees who are taking the benefits, where they fall, and the cost. Now, we don't see actual employee names.
Right,
Everything's
of
kept
course,
confidential in that
confidential.
regard. But then that's where we strategize on how we may want to shift the benefits
Right.
accordingly to potentially decrease costs for the district. And then as we do that, we work on that. We work with the different collective bargaining groups as well. We represent new plans for the employees that where I say, oh, my plan may be going up, so I might shift over to this new plan to get a better
Yeah,
deal.
I think that would be a good thing to do. And you said it does happen yearly?
Yeah, I want to, yeah, we do that annually.
Yeah, it'd be good to know that. Thank you.
We've had a lot of questions up to this point, but are there any more questions?
thank you for this discussion, and thank you in advance for the other materials.
Well, if there's no further discussion, I'll adjourn the meeting. It's 4:37. I remind everybody that we will have a meeting on a week from today, a regular school meeting, and I look forward to seeing more people here at that time. Thank you for attending.